Support comes from PCC Community Markets, celebrating summer in the Northwest with organic blueberries locally grown by 2 family farms and hand-picked at the peak of season, with 15 neighborhood locations. More at pccmarkets.com.
Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. Bought any 2x4s lately? Then you already know that lumber prices are through the roof.
I thought that this was going to be a super slow time, but it turned out to be quite the opposite.
Vox reporter Emily Stewart will explain what's going on in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. It's a new day at Amazon as it welcomes just the second person ever to lead the company this week. Former Amazon Web Services chief Andy Jassy took the helm yesterday, 27 years to the day after Jeff Bezos founded the company. Jassy will lead the day-to-day, but Bezos will stay on as chair of the board, which he'll get to after he launches himself into near-Earth orbit on a Blue Origin rocket in 2 weeks. A Seattle man is under arrest for throwing debris into traffic on I-5. State troopers arrested the man early Monday between Kent and Federal Way. 4 drivers on southbound 5 were hit with pieces of concrete thought to be ripped off a roadside barrier. State Patrol says there have been more than 75 incidents of rocks and debris thrown from overpasses onto cars so far this year. And crossing the U.S.-Canada border is getting a little less complicated for some people. As of this week, fully vaccinated Canadians can skip the quarantine, and airline passengers won't have to stay at a government-approved hotel. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's taking it slow to avoid a resurgence of the virus, but should have a plan for full reopening later this month. Until then, non-essential travel to Canada is still a no-go. The lumber market is hot right now, according to wood trade industry publication Random Lengths. What a great name. At its peak in May, the cost of lumber was 5 times what it was pre-pandemic. Vox economy reporter Emily Stewart wasn't watching numbers when she noticed the trend. She was watching social media.
Caught my attention on the internet because I kept seeing memes about lumber. It became very in fashion for somebody to snap a picture of a pile of wood and say, oh, I met a billionaire today and things like that. And I even talked to the story for somebody on TikTok who became a famous TikTok lumberjack. So it has kind of permeated the culture in a way that sometimes these strange little economic developments don't.
While the specter of surging lumber prices played out for some on the internet, Pat Bates learned firsthand. Pat is president of Marine Lumber Market in South Park. He's been in the lumber business a long time and has learned to roll with the ups and downs of the market. But this past year, it was different.
I've been wrong on this thing for 6 straight months since the beginning of the year because we'd get new prices and we'd say to ourselves, man, there's just no way that these prices are going to go up again next week. I mean, can they? They've never been at these levels, and yet they do. And every week we say, okay, this has got to be it. And it just never stopped. It really didn't stop until maybe 2.5, 3 weeks ago now.
Prices have cooled significantly from their peak, and it's still unclear if or when they'll drop more. At this point, Pat says he's just trying to steel himself for what's to come.
Expect the unexpected, because for all of us this last 18 months, I mean, who could have predicted it 2 years ago? So there's always something crazy around the corner.
Okay, Pat is one end of the supply chain here, but here's Emily talking about why lumber prices surged the way they have.
So this is really a pretty basic supply and demand story. I guess maybe just to start with supply, if you think about it, the lumber industry just in the past several years has not been doing super well. We had the housing crisis, and the industry just hasn't been doing really hot. Prices have been pretty low, and so what happens over the past several years? A lot of sawmills, kind of slowed down production. The industry reacted accordingly. And so last year, when the pandemic hits in March and April, you think back, we all thought the economy was going to be pretty bad, right? Like, I remember sitting in my house in Brooklyn, New York, and thinking, are we entering into another Great Depression? And so we all kind of assumed that the economy would be really bad. And so did the lumber industry, right? And so they sort of prepared for the worst even more, shutting down more mills, slowing down more, laying off workers, all of that kind of stuff.
at the beginning of this thing back in March of 2020, we all kind of thought that business was going to be really slow, and really nobody knew for how long that might go on, because it was so much up in the air as to when, these different restrictions would be lifted.
So what happens on the demand side? People decide that they hate their homes because they're sitting at home so much, right? I did. I mean, I couldn't do any renovation. So what happens? People decide to fix up their houses. They build a deck. They build an office. They do home renovation projects because you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's on the weekend. At the same time, a lot of people who really hate their houses or are in cities decide they want to move, and maybe they want to build a home. And so this demand really starts to pick up. And I think kind of the key point here is that at least when demand started to pick up initially, a lot of economists and people in the industry will say they didn't really believe it. Like, nobody knew how long this was going to last. And so the industry didn't react accordingly. And then by the time the industry kind of caught on to what was going on, it was a little bit too late. When you would expect kind of these projects to slow down in the fall and winter, they really didn't. And so there was just this giant imbalance of supply and demand where everybody wanted wood and nobody could get it.
Okay, so we have a situation where we have emotional purchasing going on from people who are sitting in their houses saying, I can't stand it anymore. If I'm going to have to be here, I need to put that new deck on. I need to add that office onto my garage. And we have a processing and retail industry that couldn't really catch up because they didn't anticipate that this was actually going to last. How much does something like the fluctuation we're dealing with right now add to somebody's home building cost?
Yeah, so according to the National Association of Home Builders, they think that what's going on with lumber has added about $36,000 to the price of a newly constructed single home. So this is pricey. People are figuring this out, and I have friends who are going to build decks or whatever. I even talked to one guy in lumber for a story that I wrote on this who said, listen, I was going to build out my garage and I'm taking a pause right now because there's no way I'm paying these prices.
So let's just talk about the processors for a minute. You already said that they didn't anticipate that there would be this surge in demand and that it would last. Why can't they ramp up so quickly?
A lot of companies laid off workers, right? Whether it be the airlines or restaurants or whatever, and they've had a hard time getting people to come back. And we're not entirely sure why that is. Some people will tell you that it's unemployment benefits that are keeping people out of work. I think there are plenty of other explanations there as well. People don't have childcare work. People are also a little bit nervous to go back to work during COVID. And a lot of people are sort of rethinking kind of their work plans and what they want to do with their lives. And working at a sawmill is not an easy job.
We've talked about the fluctuation in lumber prices. Where are they now, and where do you anticipate they might be in the coming months?
So right now they're back below $1,000. To be clear, they change a lot, but the last information that I got from Random Lengths was that they were about $930. I think the big question now is really where they go. When I was talking to people in the industry back in April, they thought they were going to stay super elevated for a long time. And they have come back down. Now, they're nowhere near where they were in 2019 when they were $300, but they're getting close. I think the question kind of is, how this supply-demand situation balances out. And I think what has sort of happened, at least for now, is that it seems to have balanced out a little bit faster than everyone thought it would. Some people are really putting a pause on their projects, putting a pause on building a new house or maybe building out that deck or whatever renovation project that they wanted to do. I think the question is how long this lasts. I'm always hesitant to predict what will happen in the economy, especially in this economy. I think when you think back to last year when everybody was hoarding, yeast and toilet paper, who knows right. What the new thing will be a year from now.
Sure. And lumber, of course, is just one product, but there have been shortages like we talked about, rental cars, furniture, like you said, toilet paper. What does the experience with lumber say about what's going on with our supply chain?
I think over the past year and a half, we've just really learned kind of how complicated the supply chain is and what happens when one part of it does not quite work right. Whether, right now we are seeing what's happening with used cars, right, where prices are up enormously over the past couple of months and over the past year. This has really been kind of a lesson in how the economy works and how fragile some of this stuff is. But I think the big question mark right now is kind of how this is all going to turn out. We have a Federal Reserve that says it's keeping an eye on inflation, keeping an eye on prices to make sure they don't get too out of control. But they also think that a lot of this is transitory, meaning that it's going to be temporary and it's not going to last forever. And I think the question now is how long any of this lasts. And as we're seeing with lumber, maybe things are starting to settle back down a little bit, and we can expect that to happen in other parts of the economy.
Emily Stewart is a senior reporter at Vox.com. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. If you want to spend more than 10 minutes a day with Seattle Now, check out our Instagram. It's Seattle Now Pod. Caroline Chamberlain Gomez produced today's show. Our production team is Clare McGrane, Diana Opong, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.